We got a lot of participants. So hello, I'm Adrienne Eaton, Dean of the School of Management and Labor Relations at Rutgers University and LERA President-elect. And I would like to welcome everyone who's here, which looks like a lot of folks, to our presidential address. Again, sorry, there's no virtual lunch. We haven't figured that out yet. So thanks everybody for participating in the 72nd annual meeting, our first ever virtual conference. We're getting rave responses to the program so far. So much that I'm hearing from some of you that you'd like to keep the meeting virtual in the future. I'm not sure that we are going to want to do that, but Emily and I are already talking about what aspects of this meeting we might be able to keep, and I think we'll be talking to the program committee about that for next year as well. So normally at this time, I'd be starting with introducing the head table, but instead I'm going to acknowledge a number of members who've been important to the conference and to the LERA webinar series that led up to the conference. So let me start with the program co-chairs. I'd like to acknowledge Anne Frost, who's on the faculty of the University of Western Ontario and was the academic vice chair of the program committee. I'd also like to recognize Bonnie Summers from Blue Cross Blue Shield's National Labor Office, past president of the DC LERA chapter, and she is the practitioner vice chair of the program committee for the meeting. And then finally, I'd like to acknowledge Cindy Furseth, who's retired from Portland General Electric and the regional vice president of the LERA, the regional vice chair of the LERA program committee, meaning she was the person leading the efforts around what we would do in Portland. And we had really fun stuff lined up for Portland, but the good news is that we do expect to be back in Portland in 2023 and can still do those things then, hopefully. I'd also like to give a shout out to Maida Tapia from Michigan State, who led the technology committee that helped so much with the move to the virtual meeting. Now, again, normally I would acknowledge all of the LERA past presidents who might be in attendance. And if we were face-to-face, it would be easy to do that, but we decided that was a little challenging in Zoom. So I'm gonna just ask any president to send greetings through the chat so we know that we're here. But I am going to acknowledge and name one past president, and that is Joel Kutcher-Gershenfeld. And there's a couple of reasons for this. Joel, of course, is on the faculty at Brandeis University and just happens to be our 2020 Lifetime Achievement Award winner. So we'll be hearing from Joel shortly with a proper introduction, but I also just wanted to take this time to thank him for all of the work he did on the webinar series. We had 14 of them, all on different COVID-related topics and attended by over 1,400 distinct individuals. I'd also like to thank Tom Kochen for broaching the idea, and also Wilma Liebman and Bill Canick for their work on the webinar series. All of these folks stepped up when the current, past, and next presidents decided we were way too busy and kind of overwhelmed with our day jobs to really help LERA at that particular moment organize the webinars. But as so happens at LERA, so often happens at LERA, others were able to step up and just did a fantastic job. And I think, as you may have already heard, we've actually increased. I think we've gotten maybe 100 new members from the webinars themselves. And there's an appetite, perhaps not from Emily and Bernadette, but from the rest of us for continuing to do webinars. And then finally, thanks to Emily and Bernadette, who have done a truly heroic job in moving from the face-to-face meeting format to the virtual meeting. If you look carefully, you may see them sitting in rooms with 8 or 9 computers open at one time, and they are monitoring all the concurrent sessions and are ready to help when needed. So thanks again, Emily and Bernadette. And then finally, I'm going to acknowledge our current LERA president, Dennis Dabney, who is our featured speaker this afternoon, and there will be more of an introduction for him later. But I'm going to turn the program over to Dennis now to do a proper introduction of our Lifetime Achievement Award winner. Dennis?
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Now, as president of this organization for the past year, I take pride in many of our recent accomplishments. But what I'm going to do next gives me a different sort of pride and pleasure. That's because I have the honor of telling you about Joel Crutcher Gershenfeld. Joel is a professor at the Heller School for Social Policy and Management at Brandeis. He's authored or co-authored more than a dozen books and more than 100 articles and book chapters. He has been a leader in our field for decades. Like many of you, I've known Joel for way long time. I've worked alongside him in a number of different settings, and unfortunately, at all hours of the day and night. I, on the other hand, was already full of knowledge when I met Joel. He was a student and working on his doctoral degree. And he came to our plant where he was studying labor management partnership at the Bud Company, and I was the co-management lead. I have to say that was the first and last time he was the student. I have learned so much from my friend and colleague, Joel, over the last years. More importantly, Joel has made it so easy for so many to learn so much, not only from him directly, but also from the networks he's fostered. He created LERA's annual PhD student consortium, which is now in its 22nd year. It started with a Sloan Foundation grant that he led. It has been a great success and is now run entirely by the PhD students. He drove the creation of LERA's industrial sections and interest groups and has provided sustained leadership and support. He currently serves as the Industrial Council Interest Section Coordinating Committee Chair. If you ever see those initials in one of our documents, it's like an alphabet soup. With his brothers Neil and Alan, he helped create and fund the Walt and Gladys Gershenfeld Fund. Originally, it supported publications, and it now works to support a more diverse and inclusive LERA. I don't need to say how critical that work is today. And he has served his organization in so many other capacities, helping us all reach so many more. First of all, Joel introduced me to LERA, and the rest is history. But seriously, he served on LERA's executive board from 2003 to 2005. He served as president in 2019. He was the program chair for the 2010 annual meeting in Atlanta and our 62nd meeting. He served on our implementation committee in 2016. This year, he chaired the nominating committee. And also this year, when we were suddenly confronted with the coronavirus pandemic, he sprang into action and designed and moderated our labor employment relations during the COVID-19 pandemic webinars. These webinars have been attended by more than 1,300 people. I think it's clear from even this short summary that LERA is part of Joel's DNA. Where he may have had the biggest impact in our field and where I owe him perhaps my deepest debt of gratitude would be in training and facilitating labor and management groups in interest-based negotiations. The interest-based process is the heart and soul of our labor management partnership at Kaiser Permanente. Joel and Bob McCursey of the Sloan School of Management ran a very successful interest-based negotiation seminar at MIT for 10 years. When I worked at Detroit Edison, Joel facilitated negotiations between the company and its unions. He's also helped negotiations between Ford and the UAW. He did an extensive survey and analysis to help KP and the Alliance of Healthcare Unions understand what actions we need to take to strengthen our partnership. And he helped last year Kaiser Permanente when we were negotiating a new agreement with the coalition of Kaiser Permanente unions. Did I mention earlier that I've worked with Joe all day, all hours of the day and night. So last year, we're at the Intercontinental Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. Hopefully you will see the place when Harry hosts the LERA International Conference there. We were having a hell of a time in bargaining. The company's top executive leaders and teams were all there. Most of them don't know Joe or the honor that they had been given. One of them in particular is anxious about just who is this mild-mannered person nosing around our management caucuses. Joe doesn't know this, but I was taking a lot of heat. But as Jim Pruitt can testify, I kept saying, just wait. Well, what the heck? Who is this Joe? What the heck is this Joe fellow doing? Why are we waiting so much? So it's about 11 o'clock, midnight, or something like that, of the final day of bargaining, and we're still miles apart. All of a sudden, Joe springs into action with his shuttle diplomacy, and a deal is at hand. By early the next morning, we had an agreement, and everyone understood who that Joe guy was. Thanks, Joe. Joe, my friend, with my sincere congratulations, please accept the 2020 LERA Lifetime Annual Achievement Award.
Well, Dennis, if you were handing it to me, you would be handing it and I would be accepting it. So thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really honored and moved by your comments. There is a recorded acceptance speech on the LERA website, but I'm not going to play that now. I'm just going to speak from the heart. As Dennis says, I've known him since I was a doctoral student in the mid-1980s. And I've had the delight of watching Dennis's career unfold. I would argue that he now occupies the most important labor relations position in our country. It's been, a lesson to me. I continue to be a student of Dennis's leadership in shaping labor management relations at the enterprise and national levels. So thank you. And really to LERA, I just want to say how much this award means to me. It's something that, as I mentioned in the acceptance speech, is literally in my DNA. My involvement in LERA dates back to, as I said, before I was even born. The Philadelphia chapter, I'm told, was formed at my parents' kitchen table. And I've been a member of the Detroit, Philadelphia, and Boston chapters, which makes me kind of a local chapter crossbreed. But this award really takes on special meaning because I think I may be the first to get the award across generations. My dad received the award in 2004, and that was 16 years ago. So that makes it particularly meaningful. I also want to emphasize, as Dennis does, the diversity fund that myself and my brothers set up. We're really honored to reorient it that way. And as I mentioned in the remarks, my mom was one of the first female labor arbitrators. She mentored many women in the profession and in fact helped to write gender neutral language, I believe, for the National Academy of Arbitrators. And my dad in 1963 did a doctoral dissertation on what we would now call institutional racism. He studied the city of Lancaster, in which the unemployment rate was 12.4% for Black residents and 4 times lower for white residents. So here was prosperity in a community that was not reaching the Black community, and he documented the many barriers, transportation, housing, and others that made it more difficult for the Black communities to get jobs in what were otherwise economically burgeoning facilities. So I urge you to contribute to the fund. It will help bring diverse voices to LERA. But the last thing I'll say is just to say a thank you. A thank you to my mentors. Tom Kochen and Bob McCursey are here, Mike Piori, Lisa Lynch, and others. my colleagues at MSU, MIT, Illinois. I've spent time with folks in Australia, and of course, at this amazing social impact school, Brandeis and the Heller School for Social Policy and Management. And lastly, I want to, of course, share this award with my wife, my lifetime partner, Susan, my children, my 2 boys and their life partners, my brothers who are connected, of course, to LERA, but otherwise live very different lives, and their families, and all of the many friends that I see here as well as elsewhere. Of course, it's normal to say in a lifetime award that your lifetime of work is not yet done. And I do say that if anything, our work is more important in the years to come, given the profoundly challenging forces that are at play in our society. So thank you, Dennis, and thank you all. I'm really, really honored.
Congratulations, Joel. There's actually at the bottom of your Zoom, there's a reaction thing you can click and you can clap. I don't know what happens. There.
I was getting a lot of clap.
All right, it's next my pleasure to more formally introduce Dennis Dabney. And first, let me just add my congratulations to Joel as well, and thank you for all that you do and will continue to do, I know, for LERA. Now on to our main event for this session, and that is our presidential address. So Dennis Dabney, as many of you know, is the Senior Vice President for National Labor Relations for the Kaiser Foundation Hospitals and Health Plan. In that role, Dennis heads National Labor Relations and leads the development and execution of the National Labor Relations Strategy for Kaiser Permanente. Kaiser is one of America's leading healthcare providers, of course, has almost 23,000 physicians, more than 59,000 nurses, and 218,000 employees, the majority of whom are unionized. In this role, Dennis provides counsel to the executive team on labor issues, oversees collective bargaining with unions, and supports labor relations professionals across the organization. He is also a key leader of the Labor Management Partnership at Kaiser, and I believe he's going to be talking to us about that, and works closely with the Alliance of Healthcare Unions and the Coalition of Kaiser Permanente Unions. The LMP is the largest, most comprehensive partnership and one of the longest enduring, I might add, in the United States, begun in 1997 and encompassing 33 local unions and representing more than 132,000 of Kaiser workers. Joel alluded to Dennis's long experience in our field, and Dennis has more than 30 years of experience in human resources, including extensive labor relations experience and expertise in workforce planning and recruitment, health and welfare benefits, HR compliance, and organizational HR service models. The first talk I heard Dennis give at a LERA meeting, I think, was actually on workforce planning. Prior to joining Kaiser, Dennis held HR labor relations positions at First Energy and DT Energy, the parent company of Detroit Edison. And as Joel mentioned, he also worked at ThyssenKrupp Bud and then Bud Company itself. So Dennis has experience in many different sectors. Dennis received his bachelor's degree in business administration from Eastern Michigan University, a master's degree in public administration from Eastern Michigan. He holds a JD from the University of Detroit Mercy Law School and serves on the law school's Alumni Association Board of Directors. He's a member of the Michigan Bar Association, which could come in handy next year when we're in Detroit. A member of the Labor Relations Advisory Board of the HR Policy Association, and a member, as I just said, I guess, the University of Detroit Mercy Alumni Board. So I would like you to join me in welcoming Dennis for the talk, and I know I'm very much looking forward to what he has to say, and Dennis's remarks are pre-recorded.
Hello. Greetings to the past LERA and chapter presidents, academics, neutrals, government officials, management and union representatives, and everyone else who is tuned or dialed in today. I want to thank you all for helping us carry out LERA's 72nd annual meeting in a virtual platform. I hope everyone has been enjoying the other virtual events LERA has hosted. I've been looking forward to this speech for some time now and have been particularly excited about the chance to appear presidential. So I must say it's a bit of a letdown to be wearing my best suit and to be addressing you from my home. But with you all scattered about the various corners of the country in different states and different time zones, I'm going to pretend I am delivering an anxiously awaited, nationally televised address from who else? The president. After all, I am still president. Seriously though, to come back to what is real, this meeting has brought us together at a very challenging time. The tragic events giving rise to the Black Lives Matter movement and the civil unrest occurring around the country weigh heavily on our hearts and minds. And the coronavirus pandemic, in the space of a few short months, this pandemic has forced us to make dramatic changes in our lives, in how we work, how we communicate, educate, and graduate, how we spend time with our friends and loved ones, and how we connect despite being disconnected. That's why I feel so grateful to LERA and to all of you for finding the way to come together in these highly unusual times to attend to the important business at hand. It is nothing short of phenomenal that we've been able to pull this off. Thank you, Emily and Bernadette, and everyone else who helped make this possible. You all have been wonderful. So, given the events of the last few months, I'd like to start today with my deepest gratitude to the thousands of healthcare workers out there who are assisting patients and saving lives. What they are doing is superhuman, so I'd like to share this wonderful short video message of appreciation. Again, a deep and heartfelt thanks to all those on the front line making our lives better. I must say, it's hard to make a transition away from those Herculean efforts. But what I would like to talk about today is something that I think has helped Kaiser Permanente rise to the occasion during this pandemic. I'd like to make the case why I believe an interest-based partnership approach is the best model for management and labor. And I'll go back to the early days of my labor relations career to explain. Unlike most of you, management chose me for this work by seemingly taking out a magic wand and dubbing me as labor relations. Next thing I knew, I found myself sitting in the labor relations department of a large automobile parts manufacturing plant in Detroit, Michigan. I had zero training or understanding of this field, but little did I know, the School of Hard Knocks was patiently waiting to teach me. So there I was, a labor relations guy. One day I'm at my desk and the phone rings. Ring, ring. And I'm summoned to the press shop, where the sound of the automotive presses was so loud, it made it difficult to even hear yourself think. Let me say, these presses were big, 3 stories tall, lined in rows of 10, with 5 to 8 presses in each row. It was where we made things like an extended 13-foot Chrysler van roof. Whenever I had to go in there, I always braced myself because it was so loud and big. Anyways, I go in and the first thing I noticed was that it was eerily quiet. And that was very odd. I looked around and I saw a manager and a union representative standing at a lead press with their arms folded, facing off. All the employees had stopped working and they all were just watching the 2 men. Not knowing what to do in this situation, my labor relations instincts kicked in. I invited the 2 into an office to talk. They both readily agreed, and as we walked off, I could hear the presses beginning to run in the background. And that was a good sign. But I still had no idea how I was going to resolve the dispute. Luckily, when we got to the office, I didn't need to say a word. That's because these 2 guys began talking and apologizing to each other for putting each other in this situation. Back in the shop, they couldn't communicate because they were using an old script. A script that said that they couldn't back down in front of the employees, that they had to be strong and uncompromising. But once they got into my office, they were able to talk, and most importantly, listen to each other. It was an important thing for me to see. This was my first glimpse of seeing management and labor working together. And over the years, I have been witness to countless situations like this, where management and labor have worked together to find creative solutions to vexing issues, where they have produced quality products and where they provided a voice and security for workers. These experiences have been invaluable and have helped to make me who I am today. And over the years, I've furthered my education in labor relations through classes at Cornell, Michigan, Harvard, and other prominent schools. I've had the added privilege of working with some of the finest university professors in the country, like Joel Crutcher Gershenfeld at Brandeis, Thomas Kochen at MIT, and Harry Katz at Cornell. In addition, I've worked with some great folks at the FMCS. As I'm sure Jimmy, Scott, Linda, and Javier will tell you, there are just too many to name. And yet, firsthand experience has always been the best teacher. The second story I want to share came later in my career. Just when I was feeling ready to make my mark in the field of labor relations, I was part of a team that hosted representatives from the United Auto Workers for an important bargaining session. And I felt good going in. I thought I was bringing everything I had to this session. Unfortunately, I forgot my common sense and humility. So I remember feeling pretty good when the union really listened to our first set of demands. And yes, they were demands. And then they asked legitimate, probing questions. It felt like we were going places. But then a great person and UAW leader, Herb Wilbur, pulled me aside and said, "Dennis, I noticed you guys had a full spread buffet in your caucus room. Coffee, donuts, fruit, the works." Then he noted the same was not true for the union caucus room, which was supplied only with pitchers of water. He made the point that as hosts, we clearly were not treating them as equals. The lesson here was not about the coffee or the donuts. Well, truth be told, I would like to talk about those donuts, especially the voodoo donuts in Portland that we are currently missing. What I learned at that UAW session was not just about treating others as you want to be treated, which is monumental, but I learned about the importance of relationships and bargaining, and about the importance of trust, integrity, and being a person of your word. It was a formative experience for me in terms of how I see myself and my work. One last story. This one is from later in my career. After I moved on to the utility industry, working with excellent union leaders like Mike Langford from the Utility Workers Union and Jim Hunter from the IBEW. It was during this time in my career that I learned more about interest-based bargaining and a facilitated process. One day, we're at the bargaining table, negotiating over what else? Benefits. We had an interest on the table that employees participate in the cost of health benefits. A union representative asked the company in a not so pleasant way, how much money did we want employees to give from their paychecks? We all agreed this was an excellent question. Days later, we settled for much less than the 5% originally asked for. For me, that solution brought an end to days of arguing over expenses of healthcare. It became clear to me that interest-based conversation can deliver better outcomes for all parties involved. Another important lesson learned. All of these lessons continue to inform my current work in healthcare, and more specifically with labor management partnerships, which I think are a better, or shall I say, superior approach to labor relations. Before I explain why, I just want to say that partnership is not utopia. It brings its own crazy, unique challenges. But I do believe the challenges that partnership presents are in the end truly worth the trouble. Because partnership at its core expands the opportunities for developing strong and long-lasting relationships between labor and management. So, what is it about partnership that fuels its success? The cornerstone of a great partnership is teams, employees working together to achieve better performance, quality, and customer satisfaction. They improve the work environment. I'm going to show you a video featuring one of our unit-based teams. They bring together frontline employees with managers and physicians to innovate and improve performance throughout our organization. These teams represent the essence of partnership.
Just by simply striking up a conversation that has now had $1 million effect, essentially. Our UET team consists of assistants, technicians, and pharmacists. Our challenge was that our inventory had risen to $3.6 million. At that point, we realized that we needed to do something to reduce it to help save money for the San Diego area. noticed that a lot of our cost was in very expensive medications, hepatitis C and antiviral medications. We realized that we had professionals in this area. So it was hunting down our ambulatory pharmacists, developing some relationships and asking them what they were seeing.
Having the relationship with outpatient pharmacy and the inventory control assistant has been great to manage my patients, because with the tight communications we have, we will be able to locate where the medication will be, so the patient has a good expectation where and when to pick up the medications.
We were able to drastically reduce our pharmacy inventory with those drugs, but also optimize it to make sure that we had just the right amount to be able to serve our patients. In addition, it ended up being a safety project. So instead of opening 30 small bottles, we're opening one large bottle.
It saves pretty much a lot of twisting and turning of the bottles. I mean, your wrists will love you. I can tell you that right now, because we have pharmacist technicians that say, hey, this is a great idea. Why didn't we think about this a long time ago?
The team featured in that video is one of more than 3,600 unit-based teams working across Kaiser Permanente. They drive efforts to continually improve the care we provide to our 12.3 million members, and to also improve the workplace experience of our tens of thousands of employees. The work of our UBTs affects virtually every aspect of our business. We have teams engaged in continuous improvement and innovation, not only in clinical settings, in our emergency departments, maternity, pharmacy, pediatrics, and oncology units, but also in support settings, from food and nutrition services to our housekeeping and janitorial staff. And they clearly are making a difference. We evaluate how well our teams are working on a regular basis. That information, combined with quarterly surveys of Kaiser Permanente employees, provides strong evidence of the positive impact the UBTs have. The surveys show that employees who are closely involved in UBT work have significantly better scores in response to questions about their health and overall well-being. They are also much more likely to feel they have a voice in making important decisions about their work, and feel they can speak up safely on the job. This is an extremely important point, as it ties directly to patient safety. Departments with high-performing UBTs also have fewer workplace injuries, they have fewer lost work days, and they see improved patient satisfaction. From my perspective, interest-based partnership helps to achieve superior outcomes for everybody: the employer, the employees, and the unions. Partnership brings together diverse points of view, which can only lead to better decisions. This approach requires daily collaboration between labor and management. Sometimes the process is frustrating, but the frequent collaboration builds trust. And it fosters a collective belief that it's possible for labor and management to both win. Again, it doesn't guarantee labor management harmony. The differences between labor and management are inevitable, especially during bargaining. But my many years in this business have convinced me that it is important to let your shared interests define the relationship and not the differences. My experience in partnership has shown me that it's possible to develop labor management relationships that are about much more than simply who gets a larger slice of the pie. That's just old school thinking. Kaiser Permanente has seen continuous improvement in service, quality, and performance. At a time when union membership has declined in the United States, our partnership unions have seen their membership almost double in the last 2 decades, and our workers consistently receive leading wages and benefits, commitments to job security, and a powerful voice in key decisions. The success of our teams reflects the truth about labor management relationships that I've learned early in my career. The partnership approach we pursue is a better way to go. Not easy, but better. I will end today with a quote from our former CEO, Bernard Tyson, who suddenly passed away in November of last year, and whose support for our partnership was unrelenting. He said, "Our labor management partnership has helped make Kaiser Permanente a better place to get care and a better place to work. It has made Kaiser Permanente and its workforce strong, set us apart, and given KP a unique competitive advantage. Maybe it can do the same for your organization." With that, I want to remind you all to stay safe, stay healthy, practice social distancing, wash your hands, and wear a mask. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. I'd like to ask others to join me in clapping virtually. Thanks so much, Dennis, for those great remarks. So we do have a few minutes. If anyone wants to ask a question, I'd ask that you put it into chat and then I can read it. While others are thinking about a question, I actually have one for you, Dennis. And my question is, given your varied background, if there are 2 or 3 things that you have noticed in working in healthcare that are unique or different from either the utility companies or manufacturing in terms of labor relations. So something special about healthcare labor relations from your point of view?
I would say that the difference in healthcare from any other industry I've worked in is that people in healthcare, you know, it's almost like they're on a mission and it's a cause, and they're there because they want to be there. Something happened to someone in their family, mother, father, brother, sister, and they decided to dedicate themselves to healthcare. So their commitment and that kind of stuff is just totally different than I've seen in any other industry.
Thank you for that. So Jody Hoffer-Guttel flips that question around and asks, what are the things that are the same? What's sort of similar across all the different contexts?
I think what's similar is people having a desire to have an influence on their work environment at the front line. So all workers want to be involved in decisions that are made. All workers want to offer their objective opinions and about what happens in the work environment. And so I think those are some of the similarities that I see across different spectrums.
Heather Grubb asks, is the labor management partnership model being replicated in other healthcare organizations? And if not, what do you perceive as the barriers?
I'm not sure it's being replicated elsewhere, which is kind of why I made the remarks that I did, trying to encourage people to do this. Again, it's not easy. And I've talked to a number of people about why isn't it duplicated elsewhere in the United States, and you know, just understanding it's like not the American way. That's just not how we interact with labor in this country. Is one factor, and then another factor that I see is management isn't rewarded for taking these kind of risks. And so when you look at how my bonus is calculated, it's not calculated based on partnership and results from partnership or relationships with labor. And so when I look at my peers and ask, well, why don't you do this? It's more of a, why would I? Why would I take that risk? Because it is risky. So those are the things that I can think of.
Thank you for that. I think as a follow-up to that, let me say, Paul Clark is asking if you have ideas on, I guess, how to change that really, and how we could collectively help to get more union and management practitioners to invest in interest-based approaches or partnership.
So one thing I think, again, is forums like this where we bring this to the forefront and bring it to people. Another thing, Hal Ruddock was on the program, a session with me before this, and Hal and I are willing to go anywhere and make presentations, talk to union people, talk to management people about partnerships and the benefits of it. And some organizations, I know there's one in New York, Chris Rondow, I think it's UMass, that is trying a partnership. I think there's another healthcare company in Florida that has been talking to us. So I think the more we talk about it, the more that people see the results. Like, we're a not-for-profit, but our results are fantastic when it comes to income that we can share with the communities that we are in, when it comes to growth, when it comes to prosperity for our employees, and just looking at the company as an example of, well, what makes us different than others? We attribute it to the partnership that we have and the dedication of our employees on the front line.
So there are a number of other examples of partnership in healthcare, but probably none quite as complex and comprehensive as Kaiser's, including in New York City, but also, as you mentioned, at UMass Memorial Hospital, and some elsewhere as well. So Janet Wilder posted about the partnership that she's working on. And by the way, all of them have learned from Kaiser. And I know that many people have come through to study, practitioners have come through Kaiser to study what you all do. So I'm just going to close out with one question that David Lewin is posing, which I think is a really good one. And that is, if you're willing to say, how do other senior executives, well, you mentioned about others outside of Kaiser, but at Kaiser do they share your view of interest-based bargaining and the role of unions? How widely is that view shared, either within Kaiser or without?
Say that again, how widely is it shared?
How widely
within Kaiser?
are your views? Yes, your views of interest-based bargaining and the role of unions. How widely is that shared with other people in positions like yours?
So I think that message comes from our top leadership. The reason I put Bernard in that video is because Bernard, he echoed that thought everywhere he went. And everywhere he went, he always talked to unit-based teams. He also always made sure that people understood his perspective. He says that in every executive meeting. And what I found was he actually means it. He's not just giving it lip service. That's what he means. And that's what our leaders mean. Typically, when we get criticisms from labor in our organization, it's because they believe the executives at the top of the organization believe in this and practice it and want to do this. They believe the problems are more in the lower levels in the organization, that the message doesn't seem to get down to that middle management group. But the executive leaders are all for it.
Well, I said that David had the last question, but since we've got time, I'm going to ask one more, coming from Brad Markle. Could you say a little bit about how you've been able to incorporate the voice of the customer in partnership discussions? And I do think that's a really interesting question.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've done through our unit-based teams is we actually invite patients to come in and talk to our unit-based teams about, their treatment and satisfaction. So an example I'll use is we had a neonatal unit where parents had premature babies, and their biggest frustration was they wanted to be with their baby 24/7, and they couldn't because they're in these incubators, and it's difficult to have parents there 24/7. But it was through conversations with patients and the unit-based teams that they decided to install cameras in the incubators so parents had 24/7 access to their babies. And I think it's that patient involvement in those discussions with unit-based teams that make things better for patients and us.
Great. Well, I want to again thank Dennis for the talk and for his answers to our questions. And I'm going to clap again. So, some closing remarks, and I will send you on your way to the next sessions. Thank you all for attending this year's presidential address. We hope to see all of you in June of 2021, hopefully face-to-face, for the 73rd annual meeting at the Motor City Hotel in Detroit, Michigan. The dates in 2021 will be June 3rd through 6th. And then again, just to remind you, we have 6 interesting breakout sessions after this. One on building a healthy healthcare workforce, a sustainable future for healthcare work. One on migration policy and the nature of work. One on labor in journalism in 2020. Another on from the LERA dispute resolution interest section, talking about diversity and dispute resolution. Then we have a LERA best papers session featuring papers on international and comparative industrial relations. A session on the emergent field of labor standards enforcement research. And then also the Junior Faculty Consortium will be taking place from 3 to 5:15. So again, thanks Dennis, and thanks everyone for joining us.